welcome on in to the Wolverine Live. Clayton Safey here with Chris Ballas. Thank you to people joining us live. Also, viewers/listeners after the fact as well. Please like the video if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. 5-star review if you're listening on the audio version. I got my turnover buffs on. Clayton Safey here with Chris Ballas. CB, what's going on? How do I look?
You look great. Are those? I was asking you earlier. Are those the actual turnover buffs? I think those are like $500 sunglasses, aren't they?
Yeah, no, I think they're more than that. The actual ones, they're like $1,200. These are from the M-Den.
Okay.
So these are about $20. Will Johnson selling them, So
that's hilarious. Awesome. Well, we'll see.
There.
Hopefully we see a bunch of them in Michigan Stadium this year, and hopefully they're using them a lot. So we'll see.
No doubt. We are brought to you tonight by Bird Dogs. Rundown of the show, we'll talk about Jim Harbaugh and the NCAA stuff. Doesn't seem like there will be a suspension this season for Harbaugh. Things drag on into the next offseason. We also have a cameo from Chris's cat.
Not my cat.
Okay, not his cat. A cat.
A cat.
A potential stray cat that has joined the mix. Special guest on the podcast. But we'll talk about all the Jim Harbaugh stuff, and then we will get into a bunch of different questions from folks on our message board over at thewolverine.com. Also, your comments in the YouTube chat, so get those in right now, and we will answer those after the opening segment. But as I mentioned, we are brought to you by Bird Dogs. You know what makes you look good? Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. I can attest to that. I have both. Bird Dogs, much better. They fit way better than regular shorts, too, that are made of stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fix this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Bird Dogs uses anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. They sent us some and actually had some beforehand. And CB, how do you like your Bird Dogs? They sent
wearing
us
them right now, and I wore them up in Canada, and
Nice.
Absolutely loved them. I got a ton of compliments. In fact, Canada Mike, who invited us up there, is going to buy some because he liked the way mine fits so much. I wasn't quite sure how to take that, nor am I quite sure how to take this photo. But you know what? It was. But I'm happy with them. I love them. I got some golf pants too. They're fantastic. So thank you, Bird Dogs, very much. I couldn't recommend them more highly.
Yeah, all weekend I was going back and forth between the shorts and the joggers they sent us. So it's not just shorts, too. They got really comfortable joggers. And if Canada Mike or anyone else wants to get in on Bird Dogs, go to birddogs.com/Wolverine or enter the promo code Wolverine at birddogs.com. You will get a free hat with your purchase. So no reason not to put in promo code Wolverine or go to birddogs.com/Wolverine. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We can promise you that. I am going to take these turnover buffs off, though, because I didn't get a turnover. I don't deserve to wear them.
Not yet.
At this point. Not yet. I will get a turnover maybe at some point this season. Let's talk about Jim Harbaugh and the NCAA. Big news over the weekend that the proposed or, potential negotiated resolution with the NCAA for his level 1 violation is now off the table. The deal's basically off at this point. It will now go likely to a hearing with the NCAA's Committee on Infractions. As everyone knows, it was kind of trending towards a potential 4-game suspension with that resolution, but fell through. CB, your instant reaction as you're up in Canada and you see this news.
Well, we broke the news on our message board. I know Yahoo took credit for it, but we posted it there hours before they did. I'm sure you saw it. So that was what was being. Those were the rumblings. Those were the basically that's what we heard from people close to it. So I was stunned. I was in a pool when I was writing the message board post, believe it or not, which was fantastic. But to me, this is the NCAA is gonna NCAA is what it boils down to. And you got a guy with a couple of Alabama degrees coming out and speaking about it, and according to Dan Wetzel from Yahoo, basically saying, going against their own bylaws of not speaking on something like this. So you've got to imagine that Jim Harbaugh has a case if he wants to fight it. Ideally, in speaking with people close to it, it would have been resolved this year, and maybe. I don't know that it's completely out of the question that something could still happen in 2023. Let's put it that way. But I think it's more likely that this thing drags on. Hopefully Michigan digs in and says this is ridiculous. And, when they say it's not about a burger, what I can say is, it's about, buying a kid a burger that when he came on a visit, an impromptu visit or whatever. It's not like they scheduled it from what I've heard. But long story short is that, I think Jim Harbaugh firmly believes that Michigan has his back. I do believe that there's a contract ready to be signed by him that wouldn't prevent him from going back to the NFL, but it would certainly, at least it would make it appear that he was thinking about staying here long term. But I don't think it will be signed just because it would look bad to the NCAA at this point if they signed him to a new deal. It would look like they were thumbing their nose at him. So I would expect that to drag on as well. So here we are.
Yeah, basically the story is the NCAA can thumb its nose at Michigan and Jim Harbaugh, but Michigan can't do it back. And it's smart that they're not at this point. But the guy with a couple Alabama degrees that you were mentioning, Derek Crawford, NCAA Vice President for Hearing Operations. But I'll read his statement, which was unprecedented.
Yeah,
from all sorts of people that have covered this on a national scale. Covering Michigan, we haven't covered a ton of NCAA violations, but they're saying completely unprecedented. But this is from Derek Crawford, Vice President at the NCAA's Hearing Operations, says the Michigan infractions case is related to impermissible on and off-campus recruiting during the COVID-19 dead period and impermissible coaching activities, not a cheeseburger. It is not uncommon for the Committee of Infractions to seek clarification on key facts prior to accepting. If the involved parties cannot resolve a case through the negotiated resolution process, it may proceed to a hearing, but the committee believes cooperation is the best avenue to quickly resolve issues. So basically, then you get not a direct response to this, but Harbaugh's attorney, Tom Mars, who, as many people who've follow college sports know, has done a really great job with a lot of these high-profile cases, is tweeting saying, hey, not really directly, but tweeting out the bylaws of the NCAA, how, they cannot release statements or talk about this stuff before it goes to a trial. I mean, it's kind of tainting, in my opinion, the trial process or the hearing that's going to happen likely after this season. And then, it's one of those things where the NCAA is tainting its own process, and it feels like a desperate move to me from a guy who couldn't get the negotiated resolution done before this hearing, which was kind of his goal with Jim Harbaugh in the NCAA. Your thoughts on him making this statement?
It's a joke. You know what? And it's like, I think it was Stuart Mandel from The Athletic saying that no, in 20 years, he hasn't seen the NCAA do something like this. So why are you trying to make an example of Jim Harbaugh about a level 2 violation that, becomes a level 1 because he says he doesn't remember something? But more than anything, I think right now is, people that's people that I've spoken with are like, okay, guys like Tom Mars, with all due respect, and I like Tom Mars and what he's doing here, the leaks and things like that need to stop, and it needs to sort itself out with as little interference as possible, with as few people talking to the media as possible. I don't think that helps Michigan's case. And, we wrote our piece on it on Sunday. That's all we're going to say about it, other than what we've continued to say about the NCAA for years. And I'm not going to change my stance on that. The hypocrisy, the absolute hypocrisy. And I got to tell you, some of the things that we've heard about what other schools get away with, particularly, south of the Mason-Dixon line, not a shock to anybody. I'll go back to what a kid told me about when he visited down there, and they tried to set him up with some, I don't even want to talk about it. I probably shouldn't say it, but it was horrible. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me that this is happening. And this is what the NCAA has chosen to focus on. To me, it's absolutely ridiculous. So the sooner it's resolved, the better. Is it going to scare Jim Harbaugh back to the NFL? Is he going to have options? Who knows? If he wins 3 Big Ten championships in a row, maybe it will. Maybe he will decide that he'd had enough of it. We know that he almost left for Minnesota. We don't know exactly what happened with the Broncos last year, but there was serious interest, it seems like, on both sides. So you hope that this resolves itself, that Jim Harbaugh is here for another 8 to 10 years. Like he said, he wants to coach until he dies or whatever. Well, so in other words, hopefully maybe he's coaching for, until another 25, 30 years here.
Yeah, no doubt. From an on-field standpoint, I think this is nice for Michigan to kind of kick it down the road and potentially get this off the table, like for good, maybe next offseason, depending on how the hearing goes. But to me, you're going into a season where, expectations are sky high. I mean, they're number 2 in the AP poll. They're number 2 in the coaches poll. That's their highest ranking since 1991. Expectations are as high as they can get, and it feels warranted. I mean, this is the team that, on paper, this is going to be Jim Harbaugh's best team. They've made the playoff the last 2 years, but on paper, they got to win the games. They got to play the games. This feels like his best chance to win a national championship. I don't think it would have affected them in terms of wins and losses in those 4 games if Jim Harbaugh had to miss. But I do think that speed bump kind of being not a factor, at least most likely anymore for this season, I think is a positive for Michigan, even if it means, potentially he's facing some sort of suspension in 2024. I just think that the chance that it's off the table for good at some point is something that, I think outweighs the opportunity potentially for suspension in 2024. But I think, kind of clearing the deck for this year is good for Michigan, that they're going to have their head coach out there.
Interesting. What is this that just popped up here? Not a forbidden comment about any particular NCAA enforcement case, just some information about the NCAA's bylaws and internal rules regarding public comments by the COI. I'm guessing down there is that they are saying in their own bylaws that they're not allowed to talk about it.
Yes.
When in fact, right. An institution including is okay. And the infraction shall not make public disclosures about a pending case until the case has been announced in accordance with prescribed procedures. Wow.
And that's from Tom Mars for people listening.
Yes.
Tom Mars, Harbaugh's attorney, tweeting the NCAA's own bylaws, 19.3.1, public disclosure. They basically broke that. And something Dan Wetzel too wrote in his column, I believe yesterday, that they didn't even call this in their statement alleged violations. Right. They called them infractions when there hasn't even been a notice of allegations officially given to Michigan. It hasn't gone to a hearing. And technically, the folks involved with the hearing aren't actually able to know the full details yet until the hearing. So it's completely unprecedented.
So it certainly seems to me if this case were to go to court or something like that, immediately you've got something where, okay, they broke this rule. This should be thrown out. Everything should be thrown out. That's, I'm not a lawyer, but it certainly seems to me that's commonsensical that, hey, you guys screwed up and you know what? And it's over. And so we'll see where it goes from here. But now, maybe the NCAA has, more incentive to bargain or to negotiate or whatever. But long story short, this whole thing is a joke. The only people that I've seen out there that don't think so are like one set of rival fans in particular. I mean, even Ohio State fans are like, this is hilarious. And, what a just joke. And the SEC teams in the SEC are laughing all the way to the bank, saying this is crazy. So, it is what it is. I don't think it's going to be a distraction. I think once they start playing football games, it's going to be just fine. You look at the programs that actually do break rules regularly and go on to win championships. It hasn't prevented them from doing that. I don't see why it would be any different for Michigan this year. These guys are focused. They've got great leadership and they understand what they're playing for and what they're going out there for.
Yeah. Kansas won the national championship in basketball right after Bill Self basically got away with doing he hardly got punished. What was it like? 4 games against whoever.
Absurd. Yeah.
They can still have success. I think this not being a distraction, even less than it maybe would have been with the 4-game suspension, is a positive for Michigan here. That's basically where things stand. We'll see where it heads. Technically, Michigan could still self-impose something, but it doesn't seem like anyone thinks that's necessarily likely at this point. But Jim Harbaugh seems like will be on the sidelines for all 12-plus games of the 2023 season. We do have quite a few questions here from the Fort, our premium message board over at thewolverine.com. If you're not a part of it, go join us right now. It's a perfect time to join. Fall camp intel. CB just had some Saturday scrimmage intel up today. We're going to have more practice intel throughout fall camp and then leading into the season with all of our coverage inside the Fort each and every week. All sorts of good stuff planned for this football season. But let's get into some of these questions here. And first one comes from Garbo824. He wonders, who is the first off the bench at quarterback if there is a blowout in our first couple games?
Great question. I do want to make it clear that we do get Jim Harbaugh tomorrow at noon. Clay, I was going to ask you, who do you think is going to be the first reporter that asks about Jim Harbaugh's case, knowing that he can't talk about it? But
Yeah.
I wonder if anybody will bring it up. I'm guessing somebody will.
I hope someone does. You know, it's probably not
Yep.
going to be us, but I hope someone does. And then you get the no comment.
Right.
And
Yep.
that'll basically show, the difference. I think he's going to play it pretty smart. I think he's going to, basically give the no comment that he did at Big Ten Media Day. And then we'll be able to see the contrast between his no comment and the NCAA, which has clearly leaked this to national reporters.
Right.
I mean, there's a reason why the guys that are getting this stuff are getting this stuff.
Right.
And then you get that kind of rogue statement, on Saturday. So.
Right. Absurd. Anyway, back to your question, Garbo, and thank you for that. And thanks for your support on the fort, as always. You're a great poster. Davis Warren had a really nice scrimmage yesterday from what we heard. It was really zipping it. And he continues to impress. Jack Tuttle had a little incident with one of the freshmen, I think, last week. And it happens in every camp. It's not a big deal. Guys get scrap a little bit. I think I called it a kerfuffle in my
Great
article.
Word.
Thank
Great
you.
Word.
But I think that, so he's been, moved down a little bit. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if it were Davis Warren. In fact, I think he would be the guy. Now, how's he going to play in a game? You don't know, because he hasn't had that opportunity, really. I mean, he has thrown a couple balls, but when it matters, could he be the guy? So I think he would maybe get first shot. You got Jack Tuttle, who's played in a lot of games there. So I think those are obviously 2 and 3. In what order, I don't really know. Alex Orji struggled throwing the ball a little bit over the weekend. He's improved, but he's more of an athlete at this point than a quarterback, which can obviously change. We might see it with Joe Milton this year, for example. So, but to me, it's Davis Warren pretty clearly at this point, and can certainly change by the end of camp.
Right. It could certainly change. We saw the backup quarterback job change throughout last season. I think there was like 1 week where Alan Bowman traveled, 1 week where Davis Warren traveled. That sort of thing. Yeah. I mean, in also game 1 is different than if it's game 7 and they need a guy to come in and start a week. Then I wouldn't be shocked if it's maybe Jack Tuttle, who started 5 games in the Big Ten. But yeah, I've gone back and forth between Tuttle and Davis Warren, in terms of predicting going into camp, but it sounds like Warren with the edge right now. And then this question ties in from Blue Monster, longtime poster over at the fort. He's wondering, is that number 2 quarterback going to be Cade McNamara good, Shea Patterson good, or Joe Milton bad?
Yeah. Okay. Joe Milton bad, obviously, meaning what he didn't accomplish at Michigan. So he's not, I don't think there's any way he's that, in my opinion. But you don't know until Phil Martelli says, Michigan's basketball assistant, until the popcorn's kept popping, you don't know what guys are going to do on the big stage. And, John O'Korn was a perfect example of that. Had some really good practices. And then all of a sudden, you get into games. He had one good game against Purdue. And then after that, didn't quite live up to it. So in my opinion, I think he would be, he's got a better arm than Cade McNamara, frankly. And, he's got more zip on the ball. So it's hard to say. I would say maybe between a McNamara and a Patterson coming out of the gate, but it's really impossible to know.
Yeah. I mean, that would be very good.
Yeah, 100%.
I think here's what he needs to be. Wilton Spate 2015 at Minnesota.
There you go.
Can he make some plays? Wilton Spate was clutch too in his career.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those throws, Minnesota, next year at Ohio State in overtime, he makes a huge throw. He wasn't great all the time. I don't think this next quarterback is going to be generational, the guy after JJ, if he has to come in, but can they make a few plays, use the guys around them? Remember, there's a lot of talent around this backup quarterback if he has to come in as well. He won't be playing with the other backups. He'll be playing with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards and Roman Wilson and the offensive line. So that's important to note as well. Amazing Blue also asked who starts off at quarterback too. So we kind of covered that. And then this question as well, I think this is from Amazing Blue. Looking into next year, gun to your head, who is our starting quarterback if JJ leaves? He says, to be honest, I'm liking Alex Orji.
I don't think so at this point. I think Davis Warren might be more likely at this point. Right. Maybe even more likely is you go out and get a portal guy who is a fifth-year guy somewhere at some school. You look like a Russell Wilson type. Would be awesome.
Oh, I mean, that would be incredible.
But but
Caleb
somebody
Williams.
like that, right? Somebody, yeah, exactly. Just somebody, some clown off the street like that.
Yeah.
But somebody who has proven himself and has a lot of skills and wants to come into a position where he knows he's going to be protected by an outstanding offensive line, and he's going to have good skill position players around him, great defense, and a chance to do something and win something again. For all the talk about how much Michigan loses in 2024 or potentially loses, and again, I'm not convinced J.J. McCarthy doesn't come back, especially if Jim Harbaugh is here next year, which we expect he will be. But you look at the guys that are coming back. You look at Mason Graham, who had an unbelievable scrimmage. That interior defensive line. They're going to be guys back on the 1 more year plan, right? That you can convince to come back, I think. And you're going to have a ton of talent. Kenneth Grant, I can go right down the list. Maybe Junior Colson comes back on the 1 more year. You got Ernest Hausman, who's really rising at linebacker. You got Will Johnson, who's going to be back, and he's going to be an elite cornerback. You've got young corners there that are rising. I think you can get Rod Moore back on the 1 more year plan. Let's go right down the list. Let's look at the offensive line with Miles Hinton, with guys like that. There are a ton of them. So I think that's probably the most likely, in my opinion, Clay. If I had to go other, I would go other.
Yeah, of the guys on the roster, I would say it's Davis Warren. I don't think that's a huge hot take. It's basically between him and Alex Orji. Jack Tuttle does not have a 7th year in college football. Maybe he'll appeal for it, but I don't think the NCAA likes Michigan so much right now.
Yeah.
But I agree with the transfer. I know we've talked about this in the past, but like a Sam Hartman, like how Notre Dame got. I mean, I think it could be something similar to that, where kind of a mid-tier, college quarterback comes in at the very least. Maybe there is a Caleb Williams. Who knows? But no, I would expect something like that. Wheels 1132 says, and this goes right with what you're talking about with Will Johnson being elite in 2024. I think he's going to be elite this year as well. He says Will Johnson can be the best Michigan corner since blank. I thought about this a little bit beforehand. You could go a couple different ways with it. Right now he's probably the best corner since. I mean, it's tough to say. At his best moments last year were better than anything I thought DJ Turner did, but
yeah,
DJ Turner played more and had more snaps and everything else. Jordan Lewis, David Long right now, but I think he has a real opportunity to surpass those guys.
Yeah, I'd say, Leon Hall was underrated here, and I think that he is a little bit different type of player, but he's got that same swagger, and I think he's a little more athletic than Leon Hall, who was a great athlete and played really extremely well, even in the pros. So, you can't go out there and say this guy is going to be the next Charles Woodson, because there was one Charles Woodson, and you may never see another one like him, a guy that won the Heisman Trophy and could do everything. But to me, he can be in that next category, the Ty Law types, that just right up there, who is just really all-American potential. Let's put it that way. And we saw it last year. We're going to see more of that. This kid is special. And you know what? All of these guys that have kids, you look at Aiden Hutchinson's dad, Chris Hutchinson, and Deion Johnson. You know what? Keep spitting them out, guys, because we'll take all the ones you got. There you go. You got the turnover buffs. You kill me, Clay.
But that's the thing. Will Johnson comes in, creates a new tradition with the turnover buffs. He's kind of the leader of that class that is star-studded, as you talked about. Mason Graham, all these other guys.
Yep.
You got to love it with these legacy guys coming in.
Yeah, I do. And I think that something right around there, which is fantastic.
Right. I think he's going to be a first-round pick by the time he's done at Michigan after his junior year. I like this question. BMF is wondering, are we expecting to see some new wide receiver routes designed for this year with Campbell replacing Weiss as quarterbacks coach? Did he also take over passing game coordinator role? That is not in his title.
No,
that is not in his title. But Roman Wilson talking about it the other day, where he says, we'll come back to the sideline. Coach Kirk will draw something up. We talk about what we like. He draws up what we like, that sort of thing. Coach Kirk Campbell is very involved in this offense. It's going to be collaborative, but he has offensive coordinator experience at Old Dominion. Yep. And they clearly saw something out of him last year, especially at the end of the year, JJ said, where he started working closer with him, that he can be a real asset for this offense.
Yeah, and Sharon flat out told me in our exclusive interview with him for the football preview that Kirk Campbell was somebody he advocated for, that he was a guy who had a desk next to him last year and was important in helping them design things and everything else. So, but what I loved the most is that he went to these guys. He went to JJ and he went to Roman Wilson and the receivers and said, what are you most comfortable with? What do you like that we aren't doing that you think will work? And to get that kind of input and to me is fantastic. It's great leadership because, then you play to your strengths. You see if it works. You don't just automatically say, okay, we're going to do that just because you want to. But if it goes out there and in practice it works, then guess what? You're going to run it. So he reminds me of Jed Fish in that respect, in that, he's always looking. And I think he's going to be invaluable as a quarterback's coach, as a guy that's going to really help in the passing game. So, and we've heard great things about his recruiting as well. So,
yes,
to me, I think there's no question that you're going to see a little bit of a difference there in the passing game this year.
Yeah, from everything that we've been able to see since Kirk Campbell was hired back in January or February, that does not include games. So he's got to go prove it. And, we'll see how his quarterbacks play and how some of these some of this pass game stuff plays out. But so far, A+, it seems like, from recruiting to
A++.
what all guys, yeah, A++, as Jim Harbaugh would say, from recruiting to what all these guys have talked about. It's been pretty impressive. And then sticking on Kirk Campbell, M Shark FB says Campbell has clearly made an impact on the passing offense. With the continued assertion that Michigan is looking to be as balanced as possible, how much of the additional passing will come from an increase in RPO tags? Mm-hmm. How much will come from an expanded play action game? Is it safe to say some of the increase will come from those two areas, or will we see an increase in a somewhat redesigned drop back passing game as well?
Yeah, I want to ask more about the RPOs, and I don't think Sharon Moore was asked that at the press conference we had with him. We didn't get to it, and but I think when we get Kirk Campbell, that will be something that we ask him, and I think it's something that's imperative. And Mr. Shark FB is one of the elite posters on the fort. We're going to have a role for him in doing some analysis this fall, as a matter of fact. So to me, that's critical. And but I do think more play action, and you've got the stats, Clay. What JJ did in play action last year compared to dropping back was pretty impressive.
Yeah, so I have the stats on this, and then I have the stats also on RPOs. So JJ led the nation last year with 13.9 yards per attempt on play action. You can also thank Blake Corum and the offensive line for that.
Right,
obviously plays a factor, but that's complimentary football. They did not run it much. Only 80 attempts on play action. There were dozens and dozens of quarterbacks that had more attempts than him. And I will say, you look at game by game how many times they went play action. Some of the games where they're winning by a lot. Jim Harbaugh will even hold back play action passes as if it's something revolutionary to the game. But JJ McCarthy also in RPOs ranked 11th nationally in passer rating on RPO throws. 41st with 7.7 yards per attempt on RPO passes. He was one of 5 quarterbacks in the country to have 100% of his RPO passes be deemed catchable by Sports Info Solutions. He was 24 of 28, 216 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. His 28 attempts, though, ranked 100th in the country. So Michigan did not run a lot of those this year. I think Kirk Campbell can be big with that. There was a clip that went around about a month or so ago of Kirk Campbell teaching at like a high school, coaches conference, teaching the RPOs, showing some clips from Michigan practice. So I think, it indicate there that he's going to be involved with that. Let's see. Let's go down to CT Blue 72. Outside of Penn State, which road game concerns you the most and why?
Another great poster. We're going right down the list here, man. Royalty. You know what? That's a great question because there are a few. And if right now, Maryland before Ohio State, they don't scare you, but the timing of that game and where it is on the schedule, look at Illinois last year, right at home. Maryland has given Ohio State fits a couple of times before they played Michigan and should have won one of those 2 games that they lost, I think in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, on a 2-point conversion where the kid was wide open. But you know what? Minnesota is one after Nebraska. Who knows what Nebraska is going to bring to the table? Usually Nebraska isn't good. Matt Rule's not good until his 2nd or 3rd year somewhere. but they've got a little bit of talent, and that atmosphere is unbelievable. Now, it's not going to phase some of these Michigan kids, I think, who have been in these environments before, but it's certainly one of those three. And if you know what, I'd probably say Minnesota. They've got about 8 or 9 guys coming back. I think that we're on at least one All Big Ten team, so there is some talent there. PJ Fleck is a decent coach, so we'll find out.
Yeah, I'm torn between Minnesota and Maryland. The Maryland game too, like you said. I mean, we saw Michigan struggle. I know there were injuries in that game, but against Illinois last year, there have been a few times over the last 4 or 5 decades where Michigan has tripped up in that spot. One of them being when it was going to be, I think, against Minnesota, right? When in 1986, it was going to be Bo Schembechler was going to become the winningest coach in Michigan football history until he became that against Ohio State the next week. But this would be the 1,000th win for Michigan at Maryland if they're undefeated going into that game. So could be something that plays a factor there. But yeah, it's between those two. I think both teams also have really good weapons on offense. Minnesota, I don't know about their quarterback. I can't even pronounce his name. He's so Greek. But but I do like their wide receiving core. I like their tight end, and same with Maryland. And those teams are dangerous when you're playing on the road. Do think Nebraska is going to be a noon game from what we've heard, so that lessens the concern level, I would say, for that game. Maize and Blue, just a great, straight up username there over on the fort. He says, does the Texas game next season get canceled? Does it get replaced with Oregon, Washington, maybe even a Stanford or Cal instead? I mean, I don't know, but if they go to 10 games, conference games or something like that, you'd have to. Otherwise, Michigan's schedule may be the hardest of all time.
Right. So I don't think it will, because TV really wants it and money talks, right? And that's one of the things that they made sure that they kept in place when they signed the new deal. But I don't think you'll see, for example, Oregon or Washington on the Michigan schedule as well. So I think you keep Texas, and then I think you swap. I think, in fact, maybe Michigan's schedule remains the same, and you add those other teams in and force them to make some different changes in their schedule. But yeah, I don't think so. And I don't think it will be a 10-game slate. I think it will remain 9.
I agree.
So, yep. So I think that you will see Michigan play Texas next year, and excited about that one.
You can't go to 10 if the SEC is going to stay at 8. I mean, It just makes no sense.
No,
like
zero.
Why cannibalize yourselves? Just get as many teams as you can in the playoff.
Right.
Would be the theory, even though you're going to go to, potentially 20 teams
in
the Big Ten. But yeah, it's just
so dumb.
It's crazy.
Yep.
Jay Sherba, another legendary poster, says
elite.
He's very elite. One of the comments made previously about Penn State has been that they're better built to beat Ohio State than they are to beat a bully ball Michigan team. Do you think this version of the Nittany Lions is better prepared to stop Michigan's run game? If not, which Michigan opponent do you think is best equipped to challenge the Wolverines in the trenches?
Great question. And everybody's like, well, look what happened last year. That's what's going to happen the following year. It never works that way, folks. Hardly ever, and I think you will see improvement from Penn State. They said they had to get bigger, faster, stronger. I think you'll see that they'll be better, and they're going to be tough out at home. If there's one game that Michigan's going to lose on the road, and I've predicted that they might, it's Penn State. Now I can change my mind as we get closer to that game. We'll see how they do, going into it. But before, in the preseason, that's the toughest game on paper.
It's 3 months away. Yeah.
Right. Ohio State. Right. So, other than that, and I think people will probably be looking at that TCU game and their approach in stopping the Michigan run and saying, can we emulate that? But you have to have the athletes, and I think Penn State will be better. I don't think they'll stop Michigan's run, no. And I think by the fourth quarter, you're going to see them do what Hassan Haskins did to them a couple of years ago, and you're going to wear them down with that approach. So other than that, Ohio State clearly. People can say whatever they want to. They are the most talented, probably on paper. They're right there with Michigan in the Big Ten. They're going to have guys that can hang on the defensive line. We saw them stifle Michigan's running game for a good portion of that game last year until the dam broke at the end there. But they're going to be tough, and I think you're going to see a different approach from Jim Knowles next year. Or this year compared to last year when he was, crashing, blitzing every play and seemed like just really played into Michigan's hands there.
Yeah, I agree. I think Penn State too will be better equipped to stop Michigan's run game. I don't think that's saying a whole lot though, considering Michigan rushed for over 400 yards. Like, yeah, it's probably going to be better. I mean, just from the fact that you're at home, you do have a better team. I don't know though which one Penn State is built better to beat, Michigan or Ohio State. I could go either way on that. I just think that these three teams are clearly in the top three. Michigan, Ohio State, a little bit of an edge there in that top two, due in part to one of those three teams is coached by James Franklin, and the other two are not. But yeah, I think Penn State's going to be really fascinating to watch because I think the Michigan game getting blown out there really did kind of cloud a lot of people's view on what that Penn State team was. They still won 10 games or 11 games. They won the Rose Bowl. They were in the game against Ohio State towards the end. So that was still a really good team last year, and they have a lot coming back.
Yeah, and let's be clear, the venue is huge. Going to Ohio State is compared to playing them at home. So I think that's going to play a huge factor in it. And Michigan playing at Penn State, that's been a tough game just about every single year that you play there. So to me, that's going to be as critical as anything. But it's going to be another noon game there at Penn State. It's going to be fun. That crowd's going to be into it. But that one could go either way.
I'm excited for my first trip to.
I'm excited for you.
State College. Yeah.
The Ohio State one worked out okay, didn't it?
It did. 1-0 down there. 1-0. I think my dad's 3-0. So
nice.
Safeties fare pretty well down there.
Yeah. Well, your dad's going to be like 104 years old, and we're going to be dragging him down there, whether he wants to go or not. You tell him I said that.
Right.
All right.
No, yeah, I will be making him go.
Yeah.
Sure. This one from 91 Northview Wolverine. So Northview is in
my
the
man.
house.
That's my man, my alma mater, and I know this guy. Nice young man. Absolutely, from back in the day.
Awesome. Will superior coaching and player development be enough to sustain the football program and overcome NIL? He's coming with the hard-hitting questions. Those guys from Northview, they don't mess around.
They don't mess around. And you know what? Transfer portal will help. Depends on who's coaching the team. Jim Harbaugh is obviously elite. You know what? If you get Sharon Moore coming in there, I think he would do a nice job recruiting as well. But they need to get the NIL up to speed. And Jim Harbaugh is one of the elite coaches in football, period, end of story, in the last 2-3 decades, looking at his record and what he's accomplished at the highest levels of football. So wherever he's been, he's, gotten right there to the pinnacle. The only reason he didn't win a Super Bowl was because of a bad call, with all due respect to John Harbaugh. And, getting to the playoff now and beating Ohio State the way they have the last 2 years is pretty remarkable. Let's be honest, right? So compared to the inherent disadvantages they have when it comes to recruiting, number one, because of how they won't operate, which again is part of the irony of what all this crap with the NCAA, and number two, an NIL program that just is not where it needs to be. And I don't give a damn what anybody says about, we don't know that this and so on and so forth. No, they aren't where they need to be. They're working on it. I love the champion circle and all they're trying to accomplish, but they need more administrative support, in my opinion, and they need to get it up there where if they're not going to be doing the pay for play thing, Clay, then they need to have that money in place where kids can have those opportunities the second they get on campus and know that they're going to be there.
Yeah, I think you can compete at the level they're currently at if you get classes between number 5, number 10, maybe 12 on the down years, but it's harder than ever to do that without a strong NIL game. So it's kind of tough. The transfer portal, as you mentioned, I mean, what they brought in 9 guys this year. That's a all-time record for Michigan in terms of, at least in the modern area, that I can look back at. So they're adapting there. They brought in some guys that are going to contribute right away, and there's no reason to believe they're not going to continue to do that down the road. But you still need some of those homegrown guys. And when we say, well, that they're doing NIL for the current players and they're doing the one more year fund and everything else, well, you need those current players to be very good, to keep around, to then be, an even better team the next season. So that has to start somewhere, and a lot of that is going to be through the high school ranks, and you got to up your game. Similar question comes from 99 TT player TT99.
Another great
we see him on the fort all the time. I never have actually spelled that out, but does Michigan actually have donors wielding money cannons, or are we finding out that we don't have that in our arsenal like other schools do? So then what, he asked. And to that I will say, I think the Michigan donors have that money probably more than most other schools. But a couple things. One, it seems like this is very clear. There is a lack of organization compared to those other schools that had a leg up, let's be honest, that were already organized before NIL became legal. And two, I feel like a lack of urgency to get up to speed, which, for whatever reason, that they're not creating that urgency right now for the people that they have connections with. They're doing everything they can from Jim Harbaugh's standpoint, the football program standpoint, from Valiant Management, Champion Circle. But I just feel like they need a little bit more support from the athletic department.
Yeah, I'm not begging for money for a scoreboard before I'm begging for money to take care of my players, because there's not going to be any watching that scoreboard. If you don't have a winning program in that stadium, you're going to be going back to the days of, selling 2 tickets with a 2-liter of Coke or something like that. So that's the most important part. And that's what people aren't understanding. And these donors are like, okay, what am I supposed to do with my money? And everything looks good right now. We're recruiting at a high level. But, it's the Blockbuster Video thing that Chris Partridge and some of these other guys were talking about. We're on top now. In 3 years, we could be dead if we don't adapt and if we don't get on board here. So they need to do a better job convincing some of these guys, and that includes everybody, not just guys like the Champion Circle, who, again, are doing a fantastic job, but guys, at the top levels of the athletic department and everybody else supporting this.
As you've talked about and written a few times, a lot of these guys may say, well, they got a good class coming in 2024. They're winning. They just won 2 straight Big Ten championships. Where's why do we have this urgency for it? I guess, that's something they have to overcome. Maybe it's easier for Miami to say, hey, we need to get up to speed with the Michigans of the world and take their recruits, right? But that's a hurdle that you have to overcome, and one that's being overcome at other schools. So you got to get up to speed.
Yep, without a doubt. I do want to say one last thing though about the transfer portal. You don't want to get to the point where you're getting 15, 16 guys in the transfer portal and turning over. When you talked about, what you need to have those guys and that culture ingrained in these guys, that's where it needs to be. 9 to me should be like the max, or 10. Otherwise, you're doing something wrong, in my opinion. And whether that's NIL or anything else. But and Jim Harbaugh, and we need to be clear here too, that Jim Harbaugh has said that they are going to be transformational, not transactional. So he does not want to pay for players. What he wants to do is to get those ducks in a row, so that when kids get here, they're going to be able to take full advantage of their name, image, and likeness. And there is a difference. And
once there's more data on that, then you can sell that to a recruit and say, hey, this is what all of our guys made. And that's kind of the pitch without doing pay for play. Let's see. We were just moving on to Amazing Blue, who says, will we see more of JJ McCarthy running the ball using his legs as a weapon? I mean, more probably. I will say, I don't know that they're going to do a ton more designed runs, except for in some of those bigger games. We saw it against Penn State, big run in the first half. We saw it against Ohio State really in that second half. We saw it TCU probably later than we should have, I thought. So maybe a little bit more in those circumstances. But JJ said last week, I got to run more. And I think what he's referring to there is, hey, first option's not there, second option's not there, maybe third. But when you got a lane, you got to take it. And that's something he talked about last year, too. He was pretty open about how he was still figuring out how to do that. And I think he's going to be much better with his feel back there in terms of when to take off. Yeah, you basically said everything I would have said, as usual. So it's almost like you've been following the Wolverine for 15 years or something like that, man. It's like my little clone. But I will tell you this. Charles Woodson told him the same thing, Clay. Is that that's right? He said, you know what? You've got God-given ability, man. Don't be afraid to run. And I think you're going to see more of that. And as Jim Harbaugh said, I think at Media Day, he said, yeah, I'd love to see him get down, though. And you got to be careful, right? Because there is a big difference between number 1 and number 2 quarterback. And especially when you are generational, as Jim Harbaugh has called him. And Amazing Blue, another elite poster, by the way. It's just, we're getting the best of the best, man. Yeah, just because we haven't said elite doesn't mean you're not elite. Some of the people, yeah, sometimes maybe. Well, just kidding. All of the questions are from elite posters. There's no question. Let's go to one from YouTube. Ben German saying, "What's y'all's gut feeling? Harb's open up pass game first half of season, or more like last year?" I think potentially a little bit more. First half of the season there aren't a ton of tough games there in the first 4 games at least. But I think it's not going to be some huge concerted effort. What I do think it's going to be is that it's going to work a little bit more. And, inherently you're going to go to that a little bit more. And maybe in the first couple games you do it just to, you increase that number a little bit just to work on it for when you need it.
Yeah, and remember Hawaii, I mean, J.J. McCarthy had several opportunities in that game
I
and the
think he
play
threw
action.
18 passes in that game. That's a lot
Right.
for a blowout like that. Yeah.
Right, exactly. He didn't play the whole game, obviously,
Right.
and, but you know what was he, 11 of 12 or something in the first half, or I think. I don't remember what it
Sounds
was, but
right. Yeah.
it was great, and, but you wanna be able to do it against better teams, like you said. So, I think there are times that they will try it. Now, let's be honest, there were times that they tried it last year in certain situations where, okay, we're gonna go air on this series, and, it was a 3 and out or something like that, and it didn't work real well, so they went back to the ground game. So, but I think you will see a little bit more variety in the passing game, which I am excited about, number one. And they will have plenty of opportunities to try it out. But if you ask me, my gut feeling on are they going to come out slinging it and be speed and space? No. But some of it, absolutely. I think you're going to see them try to take more advantage. They've got elite tight ends, a couple of them. They've got wide receivers like Roman Wilson, who had a great spring game. I'm sorry, a great scrimmage just recently. You guys can read about that at the Wolverine.com as well. So I think they want to get those guys involved as well.
You got to get Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards the ball too. Antoine Johnson wonders, do you think Michigan has any plans to run 22 formation? I would like to see Donovan and Blake on the field. I would also like to see more screenplays and Donovan catching out of the backfield. I don't know about 22, but maybe 21 with one tight end, a couple wide receivers. But I think we're going to see those guys, whether that's Donovan in the slot, Donovan in the backfield together. But I think we are going to see it. I don't think it's going to be like every down or anything like that. I think you'll still see them, spelling each other there and making sure that each other are fresh. But
Right.
they have to be on the field together at times
Without a
because
doubt.
it's just too dangerous.
Yeah, and there is a difference between Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards as runners. There's no question in my mind that Blake Corum is going to get the majority of the carries, but you're going to see Donovan Edwards, as we saw again. Go to the Wolverine.com to read about it. Donovan Edwards did some things in the passing game in this scrimmage recently where he is elite, and that's where he's at his best, right? Not everybody's Blake Corum, and Donovan Edwards admitted that he doesn't have that wiggle right now that Blake Corum has, and some of his bigger runs last year, Jim Harbaugh said, were the result of him going where the hole wasn't and making something out of nothing. So I don't think Donovan Edwards is as good as that. But what he is good at, and as Mike Hart has said, his running backs coach, he said you could put him as a slot receiver on any team in the country and he would be outstanding. I think you're going to see him used more that way. So you're going to have an option, okay, we've got to keep an eye on Donovan Edwards out of the backfield, or maybe in the slot. We got Blake Corum back there. You got to get your best athletes on the field. And I think you're going to see more of that this year.
Agreed. Last couple ones. Let's do a basketball question. Chi-Town Blue wonders, is Juwan doing the program a disservice by seemingly only chasing 5 stars and then settling for leftovers? I mean, that's always kind of a theory, right? Like you don't want to go after and put your resources into guys that maybe you can't get. And you have to identify the recruitments where is that a guy, a winnable 5-star, like maybe a Caleb Houston or a Musa Diabate, or is that a guy that's going to go to the highest bidder? Sort of thing. I think it's tough right now with NIL. More and more guys are going to go to the highest bidder. So you got to find that middle ground. It doesn't feel like they've kind of, they've really figured out what their next phase of the recruiting strategy is going to be. But curious your take on that.
I think they are suffering more than anybody from the lack of an organized NIL presence. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if Juwan Howard was really upset about that. And we'll get his take on it in the press conference again this year to start the season. But last year he said the same thing. He said, you know what, we need to be better. We need to be better. I need to be better. We need to be better. He's not getting the support he deserves and needs, in my strong opinion on that. So it's not just the 5 stars anymore, Clay. It's the 4 stars now that you can't land some of these
In the
guys,
transfers.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. In the transfers. Yeah. Olivier Kamwa, they got, despite people trying to pull him in another direction, just because he's like, forget it, man. I want to go here, even though he could have gotten more elsewhere. There's no doubt in my mind about it. So Namari Burnett, Juwan Howard had a really good relationship with him, and he's looking to revive his career now. Promises are being made too, where these guys, are being told this is what you can do with your NIL at Michigan. So you need to uphold those as well. And if that doesn't happen, that's going to put you further behind the 8 ball. So that's another reason that they need these guys to step up, some of these boosters. But yeah, long-winded answer. But to me, I think Juwan Howard is doing what he can with what he's got at his disposal.
Definitely. And we have one from Amazing Blue. Another question. I feel like he's gotten quite a few in, but does Juwan leave after this season if he receives an enticing NBA offer? I mean, the chances of that, I feel like, go up if he continues to not get some of that support with NIL. And it would be very frustrating. If it were me, I'd be frustrated. And if you get people, calling your phone or knocking at your door, you'd have a higher likelihood of answering.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's something that I think he would consider. I think Jace will be gone. Is Jace a junior this year, senior next year? I forget.
So Jace is a senior, but he was asked to be listed as a junior on the roster. So I think he'll probably plan to be there 2 more years.
Yeah, right. So you know what? Right. So maybe a couple more years, whatever. But I would not blame him again, unless Michigan ups its game here and they're leaders and best when it comes to NIL. I remember when John Beeline was here and he was trying to get new facilities, and he's like, "Hey, man, are we leaders and best in everything, or just what you pick and choose?" And that really got people moving. So hopefully people will listen to Juwan and what he needs, because again, his back is against the wall and it's not fair to him. We've seen what he can do when he's got, some resources at his disposal and recruiting and coaching. So let's give this guy a fair shake.
No doubt. Last couple of questions before we get to them. Let's talk about our friends over at Rogue Shop. Rogue Shop, Richard and Shar. Richard is a disabled combat veteran. Shar, we got to meet her as well. She is just as impressive. She sends a handwritten note with every package. Rogue Shop operates out of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. They work to not only grow and manufacture, but also educate the population about THC-based medicines. If you're looking for products that can help with help diffuse stress and anxiety or soothe chronic pain and insomnia, Rogue Shop's menu of products is here for you, and they're willing to hop on a live chat, give detailed feedback to prospective customers that might have any questions. We had a thread up on our message board from a poster, unsolicited, a couple weeks ago, asking about what's right for him, and Mr. Rogue hops right on, and he's selling these products on the message board. It was awesome to see everybody connect over that. We've gotten a lot of people reach out, say that they've been helped by this. Rogue Shop sells Delta 8, Delta 9, CBD, and HHC products that are all lab direct without middlemen. Some of the psychoactive products they carry are gummies, moon rocks, pre-rolls, flowers, dabs, diamonds, lollipops, hard candies, and tinctures. They also have lip balms, bath soaks, soaps, CBD flowers, and hot cocoa, massage oils, pain creams, and much more. All products are handcrafted for consistently potent and perfect results. You can use the promo code THEWolverine, all one word, over at rogueshop.com for 10% off your purchase. So again, if you have any issues sleeping, chronic pain, and or have anxiety, Rogue Shop would like to help. And again, you can hop on a live chat with them to figure out exactly what suits you, and go check out rogueshop.com. Use the promo code THEWolverine. Sticking with basketball, we do have another question from Craig T., who is another great poster, talks a lot about basketball over on our message board. Will Michigan Hoops fill out their last 2 scholarships? What is going on with Hoops recruiting? Juwan had a lot of success grabbing Hunter, Musa, Caleb, Kobe, and now struggling. NIL the biggest factor, and I think we covered that it is. But in terms of the 2 scholarships remaining, you can tell they're looking. I mean, they're even looking in the JUCO ranks, right? They bring a kid in, Kobe Campbell, for a visit. He leaves without an offer, but they wanted to see what was there. So Juwan Howard and his staff throughout this offseason have really left no stone unturned to find talent. Now, some guys look like they led with at times. It falls through due to NIL. There's one, admissions thing. They're looking, but right now there aren't a ton of options, even though, we could see some pop up here in August with some of these graduates.
It would have to be. And I'm sure they'll keep an eye on that. And I do think one of them will be filled. I think they need a guard. I don't think there's any question, but they're not going to take a guy that can't help them and give him a three years of scholarship like Kobe Campbell. If they feel that's the way, that he can't help them, then you don't take him. It just doesn't make any sense. So then you can just use one of your walk-ons can fill that role. We saw John Beeline do that with CJ Lee, David Merritt back in the day, and they were contributors to NCAA tournament teams. So it's possible. Yep. But to me, I think you'll still see them looking in that avenue. They obviously aren't going to tamper with anybody, but they will be keeping a watchful eye on that and then on the back channels. But both of them know, one of them, it's still possible. Yeah,
it's the only thing that would make sense, I feel like, with Kobe Campbell is offer him a preferred walk-on spot, and
Right.
then you could go scholarship for a year or something like that. But to commit, as you mentioned, to a scholarship for 3 more years, I think
Mhm.
when you could kind of bank one of those, if you don't feel like he can help you right away, I think that
Right.
makes sense.
Yep.
Last one from Sasquatch 616.
My man.
You know what's coming? He says, "Are the rumors true that at Chris Ballas smelled so much like booze when he returned home from Canada? He was searched at the border because it was assumed he was illegally smuggling alcohol to avoid paying the duty." Can you
I can
confirm
con-
that?
I can confirm that the stuff coming out of my pores was not just sweat. And anytime you go to a Canada Mike and Danielle party, that's going to be the case. You know what? It's one of the best weekends of the year. It's always also one of the toughest weekends of the year to get through. So I can also confirm that there was about an hour and a half wait at the border. I will not disclose the details of that, but it was longer than expected. I blame Siri for part of that. I think I should have gone to the tunnel instead of the bridge, and then, when I made a run for it, that didn't help. So that's
No,
all.
that never works.
Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. But it was a blast, and thanks for asking him. Sasquatch 616, another great poster from another great area code.
Great area code. So nothing to be ashamed of, though.
Nothing to,
You just
a
can't
little bit,
comment on all of it.
a little bit to be ashamed of, probably, especially up there during the party, from what I remember. But you know what? I think my mom watches this, so we won't go into detail.
Hi, Mrs. Ballas.
Yeah.
How's it going? Sorry about that question there.
Yeah.
So,
but on that, I've got a quiche in the oven. So can we wrap this up?
absolutely. That was our
Right.
last question from Sasquatch. So
Right.
thank you to everybody for watching, everybody listening after the fact as well. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button if you want Michigan to win the national championship. Also hit the subscribe button and head to thewolverine.com as always for all of our Michigan football, basketball, and recruiting coverage. Perfect time to join right now. Scrimmage intel, practice intel, leading right into the season. So thanks everyone for being with us, and we will see you next time.